Hello.
Yes.
Oh, okay, sir. So after 5 seconds, you can start the session, sir. Okay, okay, sir.
Hello, friends. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Ankur. I'm Senior Consultant in charge Neonatology at BLK Super Speciality Hospital, Delhi, and I'm Joint Secretary NNF Delhi branch. So, welcome to this IPDS CIPLA webinar on neonatal imaging. So, today we will be discussing about mainly about the approach to neonatal chest X-ray because it's a very long and large topic, so it won't be possible to discuss each and every aspects of neonatal imaging. So what we have decided, we would be discussing about chest X-ray, and the Dr. Prashant Jain, he is a senior consultant director at BLK Super Speciality Hospital, Department of Pediatric Surgery, would be discussing about abdominal X-ray. So we know that as a pediatrician, as a clinician, we do X-ray almost on daily basis at our place, be it in NICO or PICO or in pediatric ward. So we know that the identification of patient is the most important. Before identifying the patient, we cannot label the diagnosis on that X-ray. So as far as neonatal X-ray is concerned, most of the time we do X-ray in AP view because PA view is not possible because most of the time baby would be in a supine position, not in the prone positions. We all know what is the difference between the AP and PA view. The only disadvantage of AP view is that the heart would appear slightly larger as compared to the PA view, and the anterior rib, which is shown in the red color, which would appear more prominent as compared to posterior rib, which is shown in a yellow color. So once you identify your patient, we should then approach about the basics of the X-ray. So apart from the AP view, quite often we also do either a lateral decubitus view or sometimes cross-table view. Lateral decubitus view is a view like an PA view. Like in this picture, we can show that the patient is in a lateral position and the X-ray plate would be in front of the patients and the X-ray beam would pass from the back of the patient. So it is not commonly being done in the NICU. The reason is that suppose most of the time if the patient is sick, then and then you are doing the X-ray, and quite often there are possibility that patient would be intubated. So changing position would be very difficult in a sick and hemodynamically unstable patient. However, the lateral decubitus position X-ray is being done especially to look for minimal air or minimal fluids. But the other option is that cross-table X-ray. Like in this picture, we show that the patient is in the same position. The X-ray plate we can keep either of the side, either on the left or on the right side. And basically, these cross-table X-ray is being done mainly to look for the air in the abdomen, like in the cases of pneumoperitoneum, because sometimes small air can't be visible in supine X-ray if you have not done the erect and AP view. And quite often, if there is some confusion with umbilical venous and umbilical artery line tip, then you can also diagnose the line tip position with the cross-table X-ray. So before approaching, we follow some mnemonics. So like in this, in my view, I follow this RIP view. R means rotations, I means inspirations, and P means penetration. So if the X-ray is already rotated, we should not comment on that on the diagnosis. So the to differentiate whether the X-ray is rotated or not, you have to look for either the vertebra, and you have to look for the distance from the vertebra to the both clavicle. It should be in the central position, or many a time you can draw one line and over the spinous process of the vertebra, you calculate the distance from this midline to either the outer layers of the rib cage or the inner layer of the rib cage. If the distance is similar, that means rotation is not there. The second is that inspirations. Inspiration means degree of inflation of the lung, like FRC would be calculated on the basis of anterior rib or the posterior rib. And third is the penetrations. Penetrations means so whether the X-ray is overexposed or underexposed. So overexposed means, so in penetration, what we look for the vertebra behind the heart. So if the vertebra is easily visible, that means the penetration is adequate and optimal. If the vertebra is not visible behind the vertebra, that means it is underexposed, like in this view. And if the vertebra is if it is overexposed, you will see lots of lucency in front of vertebra, mainly the thoracic vertebra and the heart. So what we call it as an overexposed X-ray. To look for the degree of inflation, we calculate on the basis of anterior ribs. So the anterior rib would be this is the ossifications area of the anterior rib. So we calculate anterior rib 1, 2, 3, and 4. So on this basis, we calculate the functional residual capacity and FRC and the degree of inflation and the inspirations of the X-ray. Ideally, the anterior rib counting should be 6th anterior rib, or in the posterior, it should be 7th or 8th. Well, why anterior rib counting is considered to be superior as compared to posterior rib, irrespective of age, especially in the pediatric and neonatal age group, we should always follow the anterior rib count rather than posterior rib count. Look at this lateral X-ray. So suppose if the X-ray beam is going through this line, that means it is crossing the upper dome of the diaphragm. So it will cross the anterior rib. Suppose this is a 6th anterior rib. So it will cross, suppose this is a 7th posterior rib. Suppose, and if the beam is going just below this, and then the anterior rib counting would remain the same, but the posterior rib counting would change. So that is why the anterior rib counting is considered to be better for functional residual capacity or to show the degree of inspirations. So like in this X-ray, this is a case of term baby with a Silverman-Anderson score was 5 and was on humidified high flow nasal cannula. So baby was maintaining saturation on 30%. But if you look at this X-ray, in this X-ray, if you look at the FRC, the anterior rib count is just 3. So whether it's a low lung volume or it's a severe lung disease, so sometimes the calculation would also depend on whether the film is inspiratory or expiratory. This film is an expiratory film because the counting is just 3. So, the counting to know whether it's inspiratory and expiratory film, we should calculate this. Now, in this X-ray, you can see that the right lung is showing the overexposed, or sometimes it looks like hyperlucent. But because this is a rotated X-ray, so we cannot comment on anything about this X-ray, even if the patient is sick. Now, to approach, so we can follow this mnemonic A for airway. Either we can start from the intrathoracic to extrathoracic cage, or we can follow from extrathoracic to intrathoracic. So it depends on you what way you want to discuss. So like I would prefer to go from intrathoracic to extrathoracic. So that's why we look for airway, then B for bone, C for cardiac, D for diaphragm, and E for extra or equal lung fills. Let's see the A part, that means airway. So for airway, we have to look for the position of the trachea. We know that the trachea should be in the central positions. And sometimes the trachea is slightly deviated towards the right side. Anytime, if the X-ray is not rotated, and if your trachea is shifted towards the left side, that means it could be pathological because of some problem because of right thoracic arch of aorta. And sometimes because of collapse, consolidation, sometimes effusion, and air leak can lead to change in the position of the trachea, either by pushing or pulling of the trachea. Like in this case, suppose this X-ray is almost nearly central, and we can see that this right side lung is collapsed because the right lower lobe and lower middle lobe is not visible, and trachea is shifted towards the right side. So in this X-ray, we can see the trachea. If you can visualize this trachea is slightly deviated towards the left side, and the airway contour should follow like this. And if it is like this, that means it's an abnormal. So in this case, it was because of the right aortic arch, which was deviating the trachea towards the left side. Sometimes we also see the caliber of the airway. Like in extreme preterm infants, the baby would require prolonged ventilation, and you start with an ET2 of 2.5 French, and gradually over 3, 5 days or 7 days, baby would require an ET2 of 3 or 4 French. That would lead to enlargement and dilatation of the airway, and this airway can lead to some lots of problems. So once you extubate the patients, maybe you would require a larger, probably cannula, to maintain this airway pressure or positive end expiratory pressure. So airway caliber you can also see on the X-ray. So B is meant for bone maturations, or sometimes we also look for the osteopenia. So for bone maturation, either we look for the knee joint, femur, or most of the time, because that part is not included in our routine X-ray, we look for the proximal humerus. So compare this proximal humerus with this X-ray and the red bar. So with this humerus, because it's almost ossified, we can tell that because the proximal humerus is ossified, and probably this baby would be a term infant, not a preterm infant. Like this patient, you can see the airway is slightly dilated, and you cannot visualize the midline bones, that is vertebra, as compared to this. So probably baby was a case of osteopenia prematurity because of poor nutrition and poor phosphorus given during the neonatal period. So by we can, with this mnemonic B, we can calculate and we can confirm the bone age and as well as the osteopenia prematurity. So at various age group, at various gestation, you can see the bone density of the humerus, proximal end of the humerus, and confirm whether it's a preterm or term infant, like in 27 week, 29 week, and 33 week. Gradually, we can see the humerus ossification is gradually increased. C for cardiac. So in the cardiac thing, we look for the cardiac size. For the calculation of the cardiac size, we draw a line for the right cardiac border and another one, the left cardiac border, and we calculate the cardiac size, and we differentiate it between the CT ratio, that means cardiac versus thoracic ratio. So we calculate the thoracic ratio from either from the outer cage of the bone or the inner cage of the rib. If the ratio is more than 0.6, then we can say that the cardiac size is enlarged. One more thing in the cardiac, we have to look for the cardiac slot on the right heart border and the left heart border. So right heart border cardiac slot is abutted by mainly by the middle lobe of the right lung. Whereas in the left side, the left heart border is abutted by the lingular lobe of the upper lobe. So if the right heart border is lost, then you can say there could be some lesion on the middle lobe. And if the left heart border cardiac slot is lost, you can say that the lesion could be because of the lingular lobe pathology. Most of the time, the neonatal disease, they are the primary disease unless until it is a surgical cause. So most of the medical disorders are bilaterally symmetrical disease. That is why you would see the right and left heart borders prominence in an equal way. If one of the heart border is looking more prominent and more lucent, then you can say that the probably air is more as compared to the other side. So this is the right heart border, this is the left heart border. I told you that the middle lobe is abutted by the right heart border. So in this case, you can see in this X-ray, the right heart border is lost. So you cannot visualize the right cardiac slot. So probably the lesion is not in the upper lobe, but in the middle lobe. In this X-ray, you can see the left heart border is not visualized. So the lesion would be in the upper lobe, but in the lingular lobe of the upper lobe. D for diaphragm. In the diaphragm, we look for the dome of the diaphragm. We know that the right dome of the diaphragm is slightly elevated as compared to the left dome of diaphragm. The right dome of diaphragm is in the mid clavicular line, whereas in the left dome of diaphragm is slightly lateral to the mid clavicular line. So we look for the dome of the diaphragm and look for the flattening. If there is a flattening of the diaphragm, that means the lung is overexpanded or some more air is there. And differentiation with other organs. We can differentiate between the margins of the diaphragm compared with the lung, heart, and the liver. If that differentiation is lost, most of the time lesion would be in the right lower lobe. Like in this case, if that differentiation is lost, we can say that the lesion could be in the lower lobe of either right lung or the left lung. Like in this X-ray in diseased lung, you can see the heart border is not visualized, both sides, probably the lesion in the middle lobe of the right side and on the left upper lobe, and but the diaphragm is also not visualized, and you cannot differentiate between the heart, diaphragm, and the liver. So probably both side lower lobe is also involved. So once we approach the X-ray, so most of the time our X-ray, chest X-ray would also include most part of the abdomen. So we also look for the below the diaphragm. So once we are looking for the below area of diaphragm, we look for the lucency of the liver. Liver should be dense as compared, it should look like the heart density, not the bone density. But if you if you find that lot of lucency over the liver, that means the possibility of air leak in the abdomen would be present. There are two areas in the abdomen where air fluid levels are normally present. That one is stomach and one is rectum. So if you look at this X-ray, because most of the time the X-ray is in the supine position, you look at this area. So this is the air fluid level in the stomach. If you don't find air fluid level in the stomach, there are chances that it's because of pathology, especially in a preterm infants, extreme preterm infants, because sometimes you put orogastric tube, and sometimes it can lead to perforation, or rarely in a cases of spontaneous gastric perforation, you will find a lot of air and you won't find any air fluid level in the gastric area. When we look at the abdominal cavity, so it is very difficult to differentiate in a neonate whether it's a small bowel problem or a large bowel problem. However, we draw a line, midline, through the vertebra, and one line and form one line transversely, and we look for all the four quadrant of the abdomen. So in the all four quadrant of the abdomen, you should find all the small lobes of the bowel in form of honeycomb or pebble. That means it is a honeycomb and pebble appearance is a normal appearance. Any dilatations would be described between if the distance between the L1 and L2 vertebra, you calculate the distance between L1 and L2 vertebra in vertical positions, and if the size is more than 0.7 of that of a single loop, you can call it as a dilated loop of the bowel. But it's a very old data which was published in the year 1980, so it is very difficult to see that it's a dilated bowel loop without looking at the clinical scenario of the patients. But any dilatation in the lengthwise, vertical wise of any loop, that means it is generally an abnormal loop dilatations. So like, as I told that below diaphragm, you just look at this X-ray, there is a lot of lucency, but there you can't find any air under the diaphragm. But when we did a lateral decubitus film, we find that there was a lot of air, and it was a case of severe abdominal distension, and it was a case of spontaneous intestinal perforation. So sometimes decubitus film is important. However, it all depends on the patient's conditions. Second thing, we should also look at the position of the orogastric tube. Orogastric tube should lie on the greater curvature of the stomach. If it is going vertically, especially in extreme preterm infants and a sick patient, it can cause damage to the stomach and sometimes can lead to perforation of the stomach. So by looking at this point, sometimes we can also diagnose the air leak in the abdominal area. So there are other conditions you can also look for, like you can see the gas under the diaphragm, the portal venous gases. Sometimes the umbilical venous line is not in the positions. So you can diagnose on the same X-ray while going for a chest X-ray. So in this X-ray, you can see the lot of portal gas was there, and this was a term infant. So we know that the portal air gas is because of the severe anisy. But in this case, probably one of the residents, when was putting umbilical venous catheter, pushed some amount of air, and when we did an X-ray, so they found that lot of air was present in the liver, and considering it is a portal venous gas, but gradually within 24 to 48 hours, it got resolved. I told you that most of the medical diseases are bilaterally symmetrical, be it HMD, TTNB, meconium aspiration syndrome, or sometimes even new BPD also. But if anything, heterogeneous and which is not similar to the same thorax, most of the time it's because of surgical condition. You can see a lot of bubbles in the left hemithorax, and the mediastinum is slightly shifted, and we cannot visualize the diaphragm on the left side, so we know that it's a case of left-sided congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So E means equal lung field. So you have to compare the right thoracic cavity versus left thoracic cavity. So look for the pleural, visceral and parietal pleura, and look for the lungs expansion. Calculate the degree of inflation by calculating the anterior ossifications area, and look at the lung homogeneity. So ideally it should be bilaterally homogeneous. Look at the air bronchogram, look at the cardiac margin. So any cardiac margin more prominent would suggest that there is more air on that side, even though it is inside the lung or not outside the pleura. Most of the time it is not visible, the vascular margin in the newborn. However, if you want to look for the vascular margin, you should look for the base of the lung. So near the base of the heart, lung, you can find the pulmonary artery prominences, not on the apices of the lungs. If anything, prominent vessels over the apices would be pathologic. So as I told you that you have to look for the cardiac margin. Like in this X-ray, we can find that we can see that the right heart margin is more prominent, more lucent than the left heart margin. That means this baby was on nasal support, but still the right lung, the air is more in the right lung. So by looking this X-ray, you can change your respiratory support settings and can improve. Otherwise, if you won't take any action on this X-ray, they can lead to a lot of air leak outside the pleura and pleural. So there is small amount of pocket is there, but this patient was managed conservatively. So once this patient's settings was decreased, so the patients improved spontaneously and their Silverman-Anderson score was decreased. So in this X-ray, you can see the left heart margin is looking more prominent as compared to right. More prominent means more lucent. That more lucent means still the air is more on the left side as compared to right, but there is no air leak. So especially in the extreme preterm infant, you intubate the patient, you give surfactant, and suddenly the alveoli rupture, and alveoli rupture leads to leakage of the air, and that air can go into the interstitium, and still there is no air in outside the pleura, but you can see that there is a lot of air in the interstitium, and it is a pulmonary interstitial emphysema. And as I told you that if you look at this side compared to this side, there is a lot of hyperlucency. So by conservative management, these patients improve. You decrease the PIP, positive and expiratory pressures. You change the position to the same side of the lung. So we change the position to the left lateral position, and within 24 hours, you can see the air was getting absorbed. So looking at the X-ray, you can change your diagnosis, you can change your settings, and you can improve the patients with immediate change in the respiratory supports. So if the air is more and it can come outside of the pleura, and it can lead to a lot of air in the pleural cavity. So looking at the distance from the this, we cannot say that whether the air is mild, moderate, and severe. So you people all know that how to diagnose the pneumothorax. So one of the other types of pneumothorax are pneumomediastinum, and one common condition, medial pneumothorax. Look at this. There is a more prominent right heart margin is prominent, and this is a thymus, and thymus is getting uplifted with the air. So if whereas compared to this X-ray, here you can see there is a lung margin on the left medial side, but there is no air in the pleural cavity. So this type of air leak is known as a medial pneumothorax, and this is quite common in a newborn, because most of the time they remain in supine positions. However, many times they get resolved immediately with the change in the setting, and most of the time they don't require any drainage by using ICT. But if you compare with this pneumomediastinum versus medial pneumothorax, they would appear similar. To differentiate it, To differentiate between mediastinum, the medial pneumothorax never uplift the thymus, whereas pneumomediastinum would uplift the thymus up. So to diagnose whether it's a pneumomediastinum versus medial pneumothorax, look at the margin, look at the thymus end. So in the medial pneumothorax, we look for visceral edge of right lung and there is no pure margin visible. So in this X-ray, we can see there is a visceral margin of the lung on the right side is visible, but there is no air in the pleural cavity. There is a mild air was there and it was ultimately drained. So again, in this X-ray, we can see that the left heart margin is more prominent as compared to right heart margin. That means air is more on the left side, even though there is no air on the pleural cavity. But again, you can see that the thymus is slightly compressed and uplifted. So possibly it is because of both medial pneumothorax and as well as pneumomediastinum, because thymus is uplifted. Like in this case, it's very clear. You can see the margin of the thymus, both the right thymus and the left thymus, they are uplifted. But again, the visceral margin of the lung is also visible. So it's a case of both pneumomediastinum and as well as medial pneumothorax. Sometimes you can find these type of X-ray in a very sick patient on a high ventilator setting. So you can find a lot of air in front of your heart. So if you find a lot of air in front of heart, but your pleural margin is intact, so these type of air is mainly in the behind the heart. So which is known as a posterior mediastinum. If you don't treat these patients, sometimes air may dissect to the neck and compress the air vessels, and sometimes leads to embolism. And many a time that this air can crosses the abdomen and can lead to air leak in the abdomen, pneumoperitoneum. If you look closely, so the posterior recess of this posterior recess of the right lung are hugely filled with air, even if there is no leak visible in the pleural cavity. And the mediastinal, there is a mediastinal herniation towards the left side from the right side. So if this type of patient is not manageable, so in that case, you have to put the drain because they would require a very high setting. So any air in front of the heart, look at the posterior recess, look at the mediastinal shifting on the other sides. It's because of herniation, you can put drain. And sometimes it is difficult to treat these patients because putting a drain over which side is difficult. So sometimes we have to put drain on both the side of the thorax. If it is not clearly visible, the air, whether air is from the right side or from the left side. So one of the more dreaded complications of air leak is that this was a case of late preterm and PPHN was on high ventilator settings, and you can find that it started with the medial pneumothorax and gradually air goes into the mediastinum, pneumomediastinum, and then it developed into pneumopericardium. So there was a lot of air in the pericardium and the patient was very sick. And if you don't have any pediatric cardiologist and not trained in putting the drain in the pericardium, what you can do, because the air is already outside the alveoli, so sometimes putting drain in the thorax would solve the purpose. Like in this case, this patient was in a bad hemodynamically unstable condition. We put the drain on the right hemothorax. We find that patient ultimately improve over few hours, and gradually you can see the air is getting drained from the pericardium area. So over next 48 hours, the pneumopericardium resolved with putting a drain on the right side of the thorax. So sometimes it is very difficult to say that whether it's a pneumomediastinum or pneumopericardium. We know that if the air is in the inferior side of the heart border, that means it is a pneumopericardium. But many times it was confirmed by the lateral X-ray. So if the air is crossing the central tendon of the diaphragm, it means it is a case of pneumopericardium, because pneumomediastinum would not cross the air from the central tendon area. But nowadays the echo is easily available, so by echo we can diagnose immediately any type of air leak syndrome in neonate at bedside. So looking at the other disease like hyaline membrane disease, we as a pediatrician find hyaline membrane disease in day-to-day practice daily. But over the year, in last few years, we found that the classical HMD is not being seen. The reason is that probably antenatal steroids uses are very good in the range of 80-85%, especially in cases of preterm delivery. And probably early usage of delivery room CPAP would improve the FRC. And we usually give surfactant within 1 to 2 hours of the life before getting any X-ray. So that is why the ideal and usual old HMD X-ray is not visible. But uh, it is not possible to differentiate and diagnose the case of severity of lung disease just on the basis of X-ray, because sometimes the patient could be in the phase of exhalations. So if the patient is in the phase of exhalation, your X-ray would find like a whiteout lungs, but baby would still on the CPAP on the humidified high flow cannula. So in the milder cases, you will find lot of granularity in the mild HMD cases. As the case would progress in mild to moderate, you would found a lot of air bronchogram, and gradually the differentiation or distinction between the heart border, the lung, and the diaphragm would be lost in cases of severe HMD. However, it all depends on the patient's clinical settings, not on the basis of chest X-ray. So many times the pneumonia would also present as like an HMT disease or sometimes TTNB. So how to differentiate, because many times you don't find any history suggestive of congenital pneumonia. What the study have found that in the 40% of the cases, you should do ultrasound, because you will found effusion in cases of congenital pneumonia versus HMD. So if the X-ray would remain be seen as the same, but if the ultrasound chest is showing effusion, the chances of congenital pneumonia would be high as compared to HMD, because they would present like the same, but both of them would require the surfactant and sometimes antibiotics in cases of congenital pneumonia. So if you have any confusion versus pneumonia, so you should go for ultrasound chest to look for effusion. I told you that the congenital disease or the primary disease are bilaterally symmetrical. Both lungs are homogeneously equally affected. Anything acquired is asymmetrical. Like in this case, this baby was intubated for 48 hours and they have a right side collapse, probably fusion also. So how to differentiate between, it's an asymmetrical disease, how to differentiate whether it's a collapse, effusion. So we compare the opacity of the lung with the liver. If the opacity of the lung is seen like a liver, that means it is a collapse. However, in cases of consolidation, you would find the lot of air bronchogram, or in cases of effusion, many times you will find the shifting of the mediastinum towards the opposite side. So look at the opacity of the lung and compare it with the liver opacity or the bone opacity. Uncommonly, we can find lung hypoplasia. So you will find because nowadays you can diagnose lung hypoplasia antenatally with the ultrasound if the fetal lung and heart ratio is less than 1 and thoracic abdominal circumference is less than 0.6. If you know that the baby is going to born with lung hypoplasia, you can change the management. Like in this case, you can see the FRC is very low. The lung volume is not even both sides, the lung is not visible at all. So in the management, you should not give, if the baby develop any respiratory distress soon after birth, you give less amount of positive end expiratory pressure in the liver room, and you should gently ventilate the patient, give surfactant as soon as possible, and ventilate the patient very gently without targeting any high tidal volume. Anything more than 4 ml per kg would be disastrous in this patient. So if the patient would require long-term ventilation, sepsis, and poor nutrition, they can develop chronic lung disease or bronchopulmonary dysplasia. So nowadays we don't see these type of chronic lung disease or old BPD where you can find a lot of atelectasis, fibrosis. Some area is overinflated, cystic, and some area is fibrotic, and some area is atelectatic. But nowadays we see more cases of new BPD. New BPD is because of immaturity and poor formation and poor alveolarization. So without looking at the history, it would be very difficult to say that whether it's a case of HMD or it's a case of BPD. So by clinical history, we can only say that this is a case of new BPD or mild BPD, because baby would be dependent on mild CPAP or mild humidified high flow nasal cannula and dependent on the oxygen for a longer period. TTNB is not uncommon disease. We know that it's a wet lung disease. There is a delayed clearance of lung fluid. So there will be a lot of prominence of the vessel and the fluid in the horizontal fissure. So you have to look for the prominence of the lung bases and prominence of the fluid. So you can see, if you closely see, then you can find a lot of fluids and the prominence of the vessels on the lower side of the thorax. So meconium aspiration syndrome, this is again a not an uncommon disease. You can find a spectrum of disease in meconium aspiration syndrome spectrum. They can present like a mild TTNB, they can present up to a severe PPHN. So you will find, depending on the severity of meconium, because there could be a coarse granular pattern, and if the meconium size is large, they can present with a large collapse of the lung and bilaterally heterogeneous disease. Quite like in 10 to 15% of the patient, you can find small amount of pleural effusion also in cases of meconium aspiration syndrome. So to differentiate between HMD, BPD, TTNB, and MAS pneumonia, two important things is in. So you will find effusion is in cases of TTNB and congenital pneumonia. The lung would be underinflated in cases of HMD, and most of the time it is overinflated like in cases of TTNB, MAS, and pneumonia. In neonates, thymic shadows are not uncommon. So thymus, to say that it is a thymus, you have to look for the T3 thoracic vertebra and the size of the T3 vertebra. If the size of the thymus is double the size of the vertebra or T3 vertebra, you can say that thymus is enlarged. There are many signs, the notch signs, the curve signs, the sail signs can be present. Only thing, sometimes you get confused whether it's a pneumonia or not. So thymus can never compress the airway first. You can see through the lung, through the thymus, and there are many signs which can be seen on the X-ray. Ultrasound can also detect and differentiate thymus between pneumonia, and sometimes they can appear and disappear depending on the severity of the disease. More the severe the disease, the thymus will disappear rapidly. So many a times in term infant on day 1 or day 2, you will find this type of knuckle. They are not the aortic knuckle, they are ductal bump. They can quite commonly present in the term infant and they would disappear. So this is not a pathological condition, this is a physiological condition. And sometimes we get confused with air leak with a skin fold. You look at the periphery of the lung and beyond the visceral pleura, you will find the vasculature. As compared in the cases of air leak, you won't find any vasculature as compared to air leak versus skin fold. So I'm not going to discuss too much about the heart, but just to give you details, if the heart is too large, if the heart is too small, if the shape is abnormal, if the vasculature is too prominent, that means the heart cause could be the reason for abnormal chest X-ray. So I told you that any shape in the change in the shape of the heart lead to the diagnosis of any congenital heart disease also. So when you look at the pulmonary vasculature, either can be it can be under prominent or less prominent, and sometimes it can be more prominent. So most of the time, the less prominent and oligemia can present with cyanosis. It is because of pulmonary artery narrowing, like in cases of TUF, pulmonary atresia, pulmonary stenosis, or sometimes because of the right atrial obstructions, tricuspid atresia and Abstin anomaly, and more commonly in cases of late preterm and term infant with the pulmonary artery hypertension, you will find a oligemic lung. So the pulmonary vasculature can present with oligemic lung, like in this case, this was a case of pulmonary artery stenosis. And sometimes you can find because of severe PAH and PPHN, which would also lead to oligemic lung in cases. And sometimes overflow and pulmonary plethora can lead to cardiac failure. See, most of the time it is because of left to right shunts, but during the first few weeks of the life, the PDA would be more important as compared to ASD, AV canal defect, and VSD, because they would present generally after 4 or 6 weeks if the size is not very large. So you will find in a PDA, or chambers would be enlarged, so cardiomegaly would be fine. There would be a lot of vasculature. I told you, look at the baseline of the heart, you will find a more prominence of the vessels, and there is a coarse vascular. So it is because of pulmonary plethora, and if the vessels and vasculatures are prominent over the apex, that means there is an abnormal prominence of pulmonary vessels. And sometimes pulmonary venous congestion and edema can present in cases of large left to right shunts and obstructed pulmonary venous return, and sometimes left ventricular obstruction or left-sided cardiac lesion. Most of the left-sided cardiac lesion would present like a shock-like condition rather than hypoxemia and cyanosis. So In this case, the heart is small, but look at the edema. It looks like an HMD maybe did not improve after surfactant. So any small heart with interstitial edema can be a mimicker of HMD. It was a case of PPC. Again, the other condition, you will find the cardiomegaly along with lot of coarse vascularization, plethoric lung. So it is because of lot of cardiac lesions and the prominence of the pulmonary artery. And sometimes if you feel the lot of peripheral congestions, it is because of pulmonary venous. So pulmonary artery prominence would be there on the more on the medial side, and the venous congestion would present on the more lateral and peripheral side of the lung if they are prominent. Now, something about the catheter tip. So we calculate the catheter length on the basis of Shukla, and there are other methods to calculate about the umbilical artery and umbilical venous. But when you insert the umbilical venous catheter especially, you would find that it can either does not cross the diaphragm, or sometimes it remains below the diaphragm. So to confirm, the best way to confirm is the ultrasound, but you should target between T8 to T9 only, and to look for whether the umbilical venous tip is the right position, you have to look for either the T8 vertebra or the right heart margin versus diaphragm. If the catheter tip is near this line, probably they are at a right position, or sometimes looking at the diaphragm. So either looking at the right heart border, diaphragm, or T8 level. If the umbilical venous catheter tip is here, that means they are at right position. And it should be targeted between T8 and T9, never more than 10 and never less than 6. An umbilical arterial catheter should target between T6 to T9. When we look at the study, what they have found when they compare the X-ray to locate the umbilical catheter tip versus ultrasound, they found that only 60-66% of the cases they were at right position between right atrium and the IVC. So we know that the position can change with the limb position of the patients, and once the Wharton jellies are there, when the cord dry, they can change the position on the same day if you do X-ray at different point of time, up to 0.5 to 0.6 centimeter. And there are certain risk factors for malposition, because if you calculate on actual length, but when you insert the catheter, they can be at not a right position because of the very low birth weight infant or in the SJ positions. So what studies have found that if you target at T8 to T9, that 90% they are at correctly positions between right atrium and the IVC. If you correct at T9, they are mostly at the correct positions. So if you target at T6 and above, all inside the heart. So how we do ultrasound to look at we do an subcostal view, and we look for the IVC. So looking at the IVC, we target the ideal position between right atrium and the IVC, but anything between these 3 points is acceptable. But anything beyond this area is not acceptable, because if your line tip is in the liver, spleen, or other area, so they are at low flow area of the liver. That means if the flow area is low and you are giving a lot of calcium and ionotropes, they can permanently damage the liver. To more confirm this, we sometimes do a short axis aortic view and look at this, and sometimes it crosses to the right atrium, interatrial septums, and goes inside this area. So short axis aortic view, you can find the catheter is inside the right atrium, crossed to the foramen navel and into the left atrium. So after doing ultrasound, so under ultrasound, we guide it and we remove 1 centimeter of umbilical catheter. Now the position was right. So that means even if X-ray is showing as the right position, probably it is not in the right position. It was we thought that it was in the right atrium, but actually it was in the left atrium. So doing ultrasound would only solve the problem, not the X-ray. If you're looking at the X-ray, just target between T8 to T9. So tip location for the PICC line. So either we insert PICC catheter through upper limb or the lower limb. If you are using the upper limb, you should target the near the superior vena cava, half to 1/3 centimeter. In preterm infants, 1 centimeter outside the right atrium. In term infants, outside 2 centimeter outside the right atrium. And some of the study also found that we can target the upper limb PICC catheter in the right tracheobronchial triangle. So this is trachea and this is the right bronchus. So we target the tip of the upper limb catheter here only. Anything not in this area is not called it as a peripherally inserted central catheter. It would be just like a midline catheter or any peripheral catheter. If you are using the lower limb, we should target near the IVC, near the diaphragm. So we should target PICC line if you are putting from the lower limb at T9 to T11 at high IVC catheter. I will stop here because I will try to, I have tried my best to include all part of chest X-ray. Now I request Dr. Prashant Jain, the senior pediatric surgeon, head of the department and director at BLK Super Specialty Hospital, to start with a reading of neonatal abdominal X-ray. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Prashant, now you can share your screen.
Yeah, thank you. Very good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Kumar Ankur, for a very excellent and detailed presentation. And I welcome you all on the behalf of BLK Center for Child Health. I am Dr. Prashant Jain, Director of Pediatric Surgery in BLK Super Specialty Hospital. And we have planned this webinar on pediatric and neonatal imaging. And this webinar, basically, we are going to conduct in 4 sessions. And the purpose is basically to brief you about the various conditions which can be easily diagnosed on abdominal X-rays, how to read the abdominal X-rays, and one should not be missing the conditions by reading the abdominal and neonatal abdominal X-rays and in pediatric as well as the neonatal age groups. So thank you, Dr. Ankur, once again. So after Dr. Ankur has already briefed you a lot about the various conditions which can be diagnosed on chest X-rays, and I will be discussing about the various surgical conditions in newborn which we can diagnose by reading the abdominal X-rays. Now, as we all know, X-ray is a very, very important diagnostic tool, very important modality, and a lot of conditions can be diagnosed by reading abdominal X-rays. And very occasionally, you need the various dye studies to confirm the diagnosis, and very rarely you need an advanced imaging to like CT scan or MRI to make a diagnosis. Now, as we have already seen by the previous speaker, that a very systematic approach is required to read any X-ray. And a very simple algorithm is that one should look for all the bony structures. One should see the gas pattern, any abnormal calcification seen on the X-rays, and also the soft tissue shadows, which could be because of any mass or any cyst. Now, because these newborn babies, when they're having congenital anomalies, they tend to have various associated congenital problems. So they can have the bony abnormalities also associated with any abdominal conditions. Like if you see in this X-ray, this newborn is a case of anorectal malformation. And if you see carefully, he is also having multiple spinal abnormalities. There's a spina bifida, there's sacral agenesis. So when you are looking for gas shadow or when you're looking at abdominal X-ray for any other purpose, we should also be seeing the other anatomical abnormalities, which will help us in making a diagnosis, especially if the child is having some syndrome or if the child is having another associated abnormalities. Now, before making a pathological diagnosis, we should be aware of how the normal abdominal X-ray looks like. So if you see an X-ray of a newborn, abdominal X-ray of a newborn, on the right upper side, you will see a normal, you will see a liver shadow. On the left side, you will have the shadow of the stomach full of gas. you can see that there's a uniform gaseous pattern, and this uniform gaseous pattern will be described as a honeycomb pattern or cobblestone pattern, in which the gas will be uniformly distributed all over the abdomen. And also you can see the gas in the pelvis. So as you can see, there's a gas in the rectum, and this is how a normal abdominal X-ray will look like. You can have the various catheters and the tubes placed inside, and any deviation from this normal should be considered pathological and should be carefully seen and interpreted. Now, focal distension can be seen of the bowel gas, although it is very difficult to describe the focal distension, but there are various thumb rules which have been described, like if the dilatation is more than the size of the surgeon's thumb, then you call it as a focal dilatation, or if it is more than the interpeduncular distance of L2 vertebra, then also we call it as the abnormal dilatation of the gas. But yes, then it has to be correlated with the clinical signs and the symptoms of the patient. Abnormal distribution, maybe you can see some gas limited in the upper abdomen, or in case you may have a gas missing in the lower part of the abdomen, the absent gas in the pelvis, that should be considered pathological. High versus low obstruction. Now, whenever we talk about high versus low obstruction, it means that any obstruction which is proximal to jejunum should be considered high obstruction, while the obstruction beyond the jejunum should be considered as the low obstruction. So like if it's a high obstruction, then you will have a maximum of 3 air fluid levels seen in the abdomen, while if it is a low obstruction, then you will have a multiple air fluid levels which are occupying whole of the abdomen. Paucity or too little of the gas, suggestive of some sort of acute or subacute obstruction. And also very important, as I mentioned, is the presence of the rectal gas in the X-ray. Now, this is all I'm talking about the intraluminal gas, but sometimes you can see the extraluminal gas, which can be present in the patients with intestinal perforation, what we call as a pneumoperitoneum. Also in the patients with a pneumatosis intestinalis, when you can see the intramural gas, which although sometimes can be difficult to diagnose, but these are the cases where you can see the extraluminal gas pattern. Now, various types of views are recommended to make a diagnosis, although sometimes it may not be possible in a sick newborn baby to perform to take the different types of views, but as a surgeon, we always prefer doing the erect films, or if not possible, then we can do a decubitus film. Supine film can give you a lot of information, but then yes, it can miss the presence of pneumoperitoneum, it can miss the presence of air fluid levels. Wherever possible, we can do a erect film. Otherwise, we can do a decubitus film, which can help us in diagnosing the pneumoperitoneum. Previously, for anorectal malformation cases, we used to perform invertograms, but again, it is very difficult and it can be risk for the child. So we prefer doing the cross-table lateral pronogram views for making a diagnosis, to classify the anorectal malformations in newborn babies. Sometimes air acts as a very good contrast media. So in case of any doubt on X-ray, we can just inject the X-ray and we can take the repeat films. So as I have mentioned that in this X-ray, you can see that it looks some abnormal gas pattern. The liver shadow is missing. This is a supine film. And when we did the decubitus film, we can see that there's a lot of gas lying below the anterior abdominal wall, and there's also a large air fluid level suggestive of pneumoperitoneum. So this is how, when you are not able to interpret the diagnosis on a plain supine X-ray, then you can do a decubitus film. Now, again, it is important that whenever a newborn is born, the gas takes some time to reach these intestines. It takes around 1 hour to reach the duodenum. It takes 3 hours to reach the small bowel. This is a small bowel 12 hours, and takes around 24 hours to reach the rectum. So, so if you do X-ray quite early, then you might miss the diagnosis of distal intestinal obstruction. So it is not important that you do the X-ray as soon as a newborn baby is born, but maybe you can delay the X-ray 3 to 4 hours unless and until you are suspecting some peritonitis in the newborn baby. Now, before proceeding the description about the various X-rays, it is important that we should have the differential diagnosis in our minds. So if when we are talking about the neonatal intestinal obstruction, there could be various differential diagnoses. It can be obstruction at the level of stomach due to pyloric atresia. It can be a duodenal obstruction because of duodenal atresia or malrotation and sometimes annular pancreas. Jejunal-ileal obstruction can be because of jejunal atresia, ileal atresia. Sometimes impacted meconium can cause the ileal obstruction. And also sometimes the colonic obstruction can be because of the Hirschsprung's disease or anorectal malformations or the colonic atresia. So we should be aware of all these different pathologies before interpreting the abdominal X-rays. Now, the presentation of the newborn baby also will vary depending on whether it's the high obstruction or whether it is a low obstruction. Vomiting will be a predominant feature whenever there is a high obstruction. Distension of the abdomen will be a delayed presentation when distension will be only limited to the upper abdomen. While abdominal distension will be a initial presentation whenever there is a lower obstruction, and gradually the child will have the distension of the whole abdomen. So this is how we can differentiate clinically whether this is a proximal gastrointestinal obstruction or whether it is a distal gastrointestinal obstruction. Proximal will have the vomiting as a predominant feature, while the abdominal distension will be a predominant feature if it's a lower gastrointestinal obstruction. Now, this is a newborn who has presented with bilious vomiting. And when the X-ray was done, it was done within 2 to 3 hours after the delivery. You can see there are 2 small air bubbles in the upper abdomen. Abdomen looks more or less scaphoid in the X-ray abdomen, and distally there's absolutely gasless abdomen. So there's no gas. The nasogastric tube is seen in the stomach. And this is a very classical, what we describe as a double bubble sign. And because although there's not a lot of distension seen because the X-ray was done soon after the delivery. So just for the confirmation, we can always repeat the X-ray by putting some amount of air. So after 10 to 15 ml of air was injected, and now we can very clearly make out the classical double bubble sign, which is because of the distension of the stomach, and the second bubble is because of the distension of the duodenum, and then distally there's absolutely no gas. So this is basically the duodenal obstruction, which can be because of duodenal atresia, sometimes can be because of the annular pancreas, and sometimes also can be seen in the patients with a malrotation, which presents with the Latz band. So the child was operated, and as you can see, there is a complete cutoff at the second part of the duodenum. The proximal duodenum is hugely dilated. The distal unused bowel is collapsed. Another same presentation with bilious vomiting, but here you can see there is a mild upper abdominal distension clinically as well as on the X-ray. Instead of 2, now you're seeing there are 3 bubbles. There's 1 bubble seen in the stomach area, 1 bubble is of the dilated duodenum, and that's the dilated jejunum. So there are 3 bubbles seen, and we call it as a triple bubble sign, which is very classical of the jejunal atresia. And so this child was operated, and as you can make out, there's a atretic bowel here, there's complete cutoff, proximal duodenum, and the stomach was distended, and there's a collapsed distal small bowel loops. Now, sometimes whenever there is a low gastrointestinal obstruction, then as I mentioned, the abdominal distension will be a more predominant feature. You will see the dilated bowel loops occupying almost whole of the abdomen. there will be multiple air fluid levels seen in the X-ray abdomen, although there is an absence of gas in the pelvis. So such kind of picture, with such kind of picture, the diagnosis can be more challenging because there will be multiple differential diagnoses when such kind of scenario is, when such kind of picture is seen on the X-ray abdomen. And this can be because of ileal atresia, obstruction at the level of ileum. It can be because of Hirschsprung's disease, when there is a long segment of the colon is involved, or in the cases with total colonic aganglionosis, the obstruction will be at the level of distal ileum, and you can have such kind of picture. Impacted meconium, because of meconium plug or meconium ileus, can also present with a similar picture with dilated loops and multiple air fluid levels. Sometimes the non-surgical causes like NEC or septic ileus can also present like this, in which the picture will be like a septic ileus and you will have multiple air fluid levels. So making a diagnosis in such scenario can be sometimes very, very tricky, and you might require further studies in the form of the contrast studies to confirm the diagnosis. I will be coming to that point later on, but this child was for having ileal atresia, and you can see the proximal dilated ileum, and this is the area of the ileal atresia and the collapsed distal bowel loops. This, as you can see, this X-ray, there's a large, very, very large air fluid level. And whenever you see such kind of picture, there could be three possibilities. Either it could be a colonic atresia, obstruction in the colon causing the large air fluid level. It could be a pouch colon, a very common congenital anomaly associated with the anorectal malformations, and is very prevalent in the North India. Or sometimes also it can be because of a pseudocyst which is formed due to antenatal perforations. So whenever there is an antenatal perforation, there will be leakage of gas as well as fluid that gets localized and will form a large pseudocyst called as a meconium pseudocyst. So these are the various differential diagnoses when you see a large air fluid level in the abdominal X-rays. This child had a colonic atresia when was explored, and this, as you can see, there's a hugely dilated colon, and that was the atretic part. So these are the various clinical scenarios which are present whenever we see the patients with the gastrointestinal obstructions. And just by a careful reading of the X-ray, we can make a diagnosis of the type of atresia. Double bubble sign suggestive of duodenal atresia, triple bubble jejunal atresia, multiple air fluid levels suggestive of ileal atresia, and a large air fluid level is suggestive of colonic atresia, which is a very, very rare pathology. Now, this is another newborn who has presented to us with a bilious aspirates, bilious vomitings. Clinically, there is a mild upper abdominal distension, but this time the child was passing a small amount of meconium also. And if you see the X-ray, there is a normal liver shadow, there's a distended stomach, there's a distended duodenum. But as we have seen in the previous X-rays, it was not a distal gasless abdomen. You can see small patches of the gases distally, absence of gas in the rectum. So basically, this is a paucity of the gas seen distally. And such kind of picture with a double bubble sign and the paucity of gas distally could be mainly because of two reasons. Either this is a malrotation of the gut with the presence of Ladd's band, or there's a duodenal web with a small perforation which has led the gas to go down distally. So whenever you see this kind of picture, one should always keep in mind the possibility of malrotation. And whenever malrotation is suspected, the child should be taken urgently for the surgery, because malrotation can lead to the volvulus of the intestine and can cause the gangrene of the intestine. So just to make you clear about the anatomy of the malrotation, normally this is the stomach. Duodenum starts at the level of L2. This is the first part, C loop of the duodenum, first part, second part, third part, and this is the ligament of the trees, which is a duodenojejunal junction, and again, which is at the level of L2. This is the normal anatomy of the duodenum and the duodenojejunal junction. But in cases of non-rotation or malrotation, the DJ junction will come to lie not on the left side, but it will be lying on the right side of the spine. So this is the midline of the spine. This is the L2 vertebra. The DJ junction is lying on the right side, which is suggestive of the malrotation. So whenever there is a malrotation, the DJ, as Cher said, will be lying on the right side. IC junction will be lying just to the left of this. It will form a very short mesentery, and because of this short mesentery, the gut tends to get volvulated, causing midgut volvulus. So in case of doubt, in case you are not able to make a diagnosis on the plain X-ray, in that case, you can order an upper GI study. And when you do an upper GI study, you can make out the stomach is distended, the duodenum is distended, and these are the collapsed jejunal loops, which instead of lying on the left side, they are lying on the right side. So DJ junction is lying on the right side because of the malrotation, and you will find, when you operate, you will find the abnormal Ladd's band in this area, which are causing the duodenal obstruction. Similarly, there's another picture, as you can make out. This is a C loop of the duodenum, which ideally should be coming here. It's lying on the right side of the abdomen. Now, sometimes you can also do the ultrasound color Doppler in these patients, and you can look for the position of superior mesenteric artery and the vein. Normally, superior mesenteric vein lies on the right side and superior mesenteric artery lies on the left side. But in case, if you see there's a reversal of the position on ultrasound, this again is suggestive of malrotation with midgut volvulus. Also, sometimes you can get a classical whirlpool sign in these patients with midgut volvulus. So when this child was explored, you can see there is a midgut volvulus. Fortunately, the gut is viable and the vascularity of the gut is intact. So we derotated the volvulus, and we release all the Ladd's band, what we call as the Ladd's procedure, and the child did fine. But you may not get, you will get that classical picture of double bubble sign and the distal gas when the gut vascularity is maintained. But if there is associated gangrene, you can have a gasless abdomen. So this is newborn. Born immediately, when was examined immediately after birth, the abdomen was distended, tense, features suggestive of peritonitis, tender, and was taken immediately for exploration, and we found that there was a volvulus with a complete intestinal gangrene. So this gasless abdomen should be taken very, very seriously, especially if it is associated with the signs of peritonitis. Now, this is a newborn, when a day 3 baby. When the child was born, the abdomen was completely flat and soft. Gradually developed increased abdominal distension. And when the X-ray was done, you can see there are multiple dilated bowel loops with few air-filled levels. Now, and also there's absence of gas in the rectal area. Now, and one important point here I would like to highlight is that in newborn babies, you cannot differentiate between the small bowel and the large bowel, because the haustras of the colon, they are absent in the large bowel. So it is not possible to differentiate whether this is a large bowel or the small bowel. Although if the dilatation is limited in the periphery, then probably you can think that this could be a large bowel dilatation. But as you can see in this picture, there are a lot of dilatation seen in the bowel loops, but we cannot make out that this is only small bowel or it's small bowel as well as the large bowel. So as I have also previously mentioned, that such kind of picture is suggestive of some distal gastrointestinal obstruction, and it could be because of ileal atresia, it could be because of Hirschsprung disease, or it could be because of meconium plugs. Now, just on the basis of this plain X-ray, we cannot make a diagnosis. And so the next step is to order a gastrographin enema study. Why gastrographin enema? Normally, we don't prefer doing the barium study in the newborns because barium tends to get impacted inside the intestines and may form the barium lids, that it can get calcified, and then it will become very difficult to remove those barium lids from the intestine. So, gastrographin is a water-soluble contrast and is the preferred agent to perform the dye studies in the newborn babies. So we did a gastrographin enema study in this newborn. Very important point here is that when you are doing a gastrographin study, the tip of your catheter should be just kept at the verge of the anus. So the tip of catheter is lying somewhere here at the anal verge, and you should not inject the contrast forcefully. Otherwise, it will dilate the rectum, and then you can miss some important findings of Hirschsprung's disease. Now, you are injecting the contrast from below. You can, this is the rectum, this is the sigmoid colon, this is the descending colon, this is the splenic flexion, and now you can make out that the dilatation of the bowel is seen proximal to the splenic flexure. So this part of the colon, proximal to splenic flexure, transverse colon, seems to be dilated, and this part is collapsed. Normally, in a normal child, if you're doing a gastrographin enema, the rectum is 2 to 3 times more dilated than the sigmoid colon. Here we see the rectum is collapsed, the sigmoid is collapsed, but the dilatation is seen in the transverse colon and the transverse sigmoid colon, in the proximal to the splenic flexure in the area of the transverse colon. So this finding is very much classical. We see in the patients with a Hirschsprung disease. This is a transition zone, and this is the ganglionated segment which is dilated, and this is a aganglionated segment which is collapsed. So by doing a gastrographin enema study, you can make out the diagnosis whether this is a Hirschsprung disease, or it is an ileal atresia, or it is a meconium plug. Now a very similar picture here. You can see the distended abdomen, dilated, multiple dilated bowel loops. Not sure whether this is a small bowel or large bowel, and there is absence of gas in the pelvis. So again, the next step would be to perform a gastrographin enema study. This is the rectum and the sigmoid, which is collapsed. This is, as you can see, there is a gradual tapering of the bowel seen here, what we call as the coning, and this is a transition zone. This is the proximal dilated, hugely dilated colon, which is ganglionated bowel. This is transition zone, and then this is the aganglionated bowel, suggestive of a very classical Hirschsprung's disease, in which we see there's an altered ratio of the proximal and the distal bowel. So this is a child with Hirschsprung disease, and you need to do a contrast enema study to confirm the diagnosis. Now, whenever there is a distal small bowel obstruction, and when you do a gastrographin study, you may find a finding what we call as a microcolon. Microcolon basically is an unused colon in which the meconium or the gas has not entered, and it looks completely collapsed. And this finding you can see whenever there is a distal ileal obstruction, could be because of atresia or meconium plug, or because of the total colonic aganglionosis. So when we did, this was a child with ileal atresia, and when we did the gastrographin study, we found that there's a microcolon present. Now, this is a newborn who had abdominal distension right from the birth. Now, the cases which we have discussed before, the cases of ileal atresia or the Hirschsprung's disease, normally they will not have abdominal distension right from the birth, and they will have a gradual progressive abdominal distension. But this newborn baby had abdominal distension right from the birth. And when the X-ray was done, there was the hugely distended abdomen, dilated bowel loops, although there was an unequal dilatation of the bowel loops. Some loops were dilated, some loops were seems to be collapsed. And very classical finding which you can make out in this X-ray, besides the absence of gas distally, is there's a soap bubble appearance. Now this soap bubble appearance is suggestive of the impacted meconium, because of which there is obstruction, there is absence of gas in the pelvis, and also there is absence of the air fluid level. So this impacted meconium will not form the air fluid levels. This impacted meconium will just cause the obstruction, proximal dilatation, and give you the soap bubble appearance, mainly in the right iliac fossa. Sometimes these patients on antenatal scan, you will have the echogenic bowel also seen. So when you are suspecting a diagnosis of meconium ileus, the next step would be again to do a gastrographin enema, which is a hyperosmolar agent. It will not only be diagnostic, but also be therapeutic, because once the gastrographin goes inside the intestines, it absorbs, it acts as a hygroscopic agent, it absorbs the water, it dilutes the impacted meconium, and the child then starts passing the meconium plugs. So this is what has happened in this case. We did a gastrographin enema study. You can see the collapsed colon, can be called as a microcolon. This is a transverse colon, and this is the ileum which is impacted with the meconium. And after this 1 or 2 trials of gastrographin enema, the child started passing the thick meconium plugs, and child got relieved. So whenever you see a newborn who has abdominal distension right from the birth, there could be 4 possibilities. Number 1, meconium ileus, as I already have described. Number 2, it is meconium peritonitis because of the antenatal perforation, or meconium ascites, again because of the antenatal perforation. It can be because of some congenital abdominal lump, maybe some liver mass, renal mass, or any tumors, or ascites because of any reasons. It can be ascites because of the urinary leakage, or it can be ascites because of cardiac problems. So distension right from the birth, the 4 possibilities should be kept in mind. This newborn had a distension right from the birth. You can see a complete ground glass appearance in the abdomen, and had antenatal perforation. Had an antenatal perforation. Because of that, the child had the meconium ascites. Now, as I have mentioned, that one should also look for some abnormal calcification in the abdomen. This newborn baby, otherwise fine, did not have any issues, was tolerating feeds, more or less uniform gas distribution. Gas in the rectum is also present. Abdomen was not distended, but some abnormal calcification was seen. And this abnormal calcification is mainly because the child had antenatal perforation, which has caused the leakage of intestinal contents, and those contents that has got calcified, giving the appearance of this calcification. But yes, sometimes it can be because of some mass or the tumor which has got calcification. So you should also do ultrasound in these patients to rule out any underlying intra-abdominal tumor, and can be because of antenatal perforation. So you can see there's a very well-defined calcified cyst lying in the abdomen because of the antenatal perforation. Now, this newborn presented with the acute abdomen, a sick newborn baby, and when the supine X-ray was done, looked something abnormal in this X-ray, not a very uniform gas pattern. Very important point is that the liver shadow was missing. So normally, which the liver shadow, which should ideally be should be looking like the shadow of the heart, it can't be very clearly seen. Also, even the stomach shadow was absent. And when we did the lateral decubitus film in this child, you can make out that there's a gas lying below the anterior abdominal wall. We prefer doing the left lateral decubitus film so that we can see the gas shadow against the liver shadow. And child had intestinal perforation was and then taken for the immediately urgent exploration. So what I want to give you the message, sometimes supine films can miss the free gas under diaphragm, which we are normally used to see. And this type of picture with absence of the liver shadow should strike in our mind, and we should always try to rule out the pneumoperitoneum. And if the child is sick, we can do a decubitus film. This is an erect X-ray, and you can see there's a very clearly gas under diaphragm on both the sign. In fact, the child had a gastric perforation, and the tube which was inserted in the stomach has come out from the stomach perforation and was lying in the pelvis. Pneumatosis intestinalis is again a diagnosis which you see in the patients with NEC, and which you can see the air specks lying in the intestinal walls. So although diagnosis can be very difficult and not be easy in when you read the X-ray, but if you see carefully, it's the intramural gas with small air specks lying within the intestinal wall. Dr. Ankur has already mentioned about the congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So, but few clues I want to mention here about the diaphragmatic hernia is, when you see a child, when you do X-ray in a child with a respiratory distress, and you find the multiple cystic-like air opacities lying in the left hemithorax, we should always think of the possibility of diaphragmatic hernia. As you can make out in this newborn, the diagnosis, there's no doubt about the diagnosis, because there is a continuity of the intestinal gas which is going in left hemithorax. So this is a herniation of the intestinal loops in the left hemithorax. Sometimes you can, one additional point you can get is that there will be paucity of the gas in the abdomen, because most of the loops, they will be lying in the left hemithorax, and there will be less gas seen in the abdominal X-rays. But if you just see this picture, multiple cystic spaces lying in the left hemithorax, and you might get confused with the cystic lung lesions. So when there's a confusion about the diaphragmatic hernia in the cystic lung lesions, you can do a further study. Either you can do a contrast study or you can do a CECT to confirm your diagnosis. So this child, you can see the multiple cystic spaces, but not a diaphragmatic hernia. Diaphragm is intact, but the congenital cystic lung lesion. This was a pneumatocele, and this is a diaphragmatic hernia. So sometimes the imaging can be very confusing, and for a surgeon, it is very important that before planning for the surgery or before prognosticating the parents about the surgery, it is important to confirm our diagnosis. Most of the diagnosis, I agree, can be made just by careful reading of the X-rays, but in case if you are not sure about the diagnosis, you can proceed with the further contrast studies. So to conclude, acute abdomen is one of the very commonest surgical emergencies in the newborns. X-ray is very, very important diagnostic tool. It is very important that we should have a good quality X-ray, and we should have a good interpretation of the abdominal X-rays. One should always proceed in orderly approach so that one must not be missing the important findings. And if you find any abnormal gas pattern and you are not sure about the diagnosis, the further evaluation should be done with the help of the DICE study. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, you can ask or you can put in the chat box. Can we conclude now?
Sir, there is no questions.